Season 3, Episode 4. Today we are looking at Breakthrough's engine number 1, the body. Hello, Father.
Hello, daughter.
Good to be with you today.
It is indeed.
Thank you for speaking with us about this very important topic.
Yeah, I thought I'd show up.
Yeah. Glad you did. Before we start,
Yes.
actually, I have something that I hope people in general will show up to, which is this week we have a really important online event happening on Saturday that if people can't show up live for, they can catch the recordings. But this is a Name Your Own Price event with you and Dr. Heather Gingrich and Melissa Finger, and you guys are going to be talking to people about the path to healing from sexual trauma. Yep. Do you want to give us a quick pitch for?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Heather Gingrich is taught counseling at Denver Theological Seminary for many years, has written 2 books on complex trauma, as an expert in the field of recovering from all kinds of trauma. And so we're delighted that she's going to be joining us. Melissa Finger runs a ministry in Kansas City that also deals with complex trauma, much of it related to the issues that arise from sexual trauma in childhood. And then I'm there just, because...
You're going to be talking about understanding the wounded heart.
Yeah.
And then each Dr. Gingrich is going to be having a session, and Melissa's going to have a session,
right.
And then you guys will do a panel together.
Yep.
So it will be a robust afternoon on a very heavy but important topic.
Yes.
And it's Name Your Own Price. So
I figure everybody is either dealing with this or knows somebody dealing with this. It's sadly all too common.
All right. Well, we are currently in a series looking at the 5 engines that drive our emotions. And breakthrough is a journey. Mm-hmm. Breakthrough is a journey. A lot of people are looking for that one big breakthrough. But one of the things that we're unpacking is that there are, you have identified, Father, 5 key core areas where people tend to need breakthroughs, and we can have small ones, big ones. Sometimes it's complex, and you need a breakthrough in multiple areas for one issue. And so right now we're looking at the body. But I think I'd like, just for the sake of making sure that we keep the holistic nature of breakthrough at the forefront, would you just give us a quick walkthrough? What are the 5 engines? Yeah,
so this is meant to be a holistic model that takes everything into consideration. And that is, there are engines that drive our emotions. Our body is one of those engines. Our beliefs is one of those engines. Our bonding attachments would be one of those engines. And then the spirit realm, it's wicked spirits and the Holy Spirit. And so a holistic model has to account for all of those. So beliefs gets into Bible, right, and what we believe about things that are true. And beyond that, just the things that we've come to believe to be true throughout life. So today we're going to focus on engine number 1 on the body, and looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm. So I can't tell you how many times, and I'm sure you've had the same experience, that I've had someone come up to me, at church, at an event, somewhere, and just be like, so what do you think about the body? And it's usually in the guise of, should so-and-so take medication for this? Or should what do you think that the body is a real issue? Or do you think it's just spiritual, or vice versa? I've met people who are kind of anti being aware of your body, and I've met people who are anti not being aware of your body, and the body is the only thing. And so I think where we tend to fall is, we've said often on this podcast and in the ministry that, if you have a spiritual warfare issue, only a spiritual warfare solution is going to solve it. And if you have a physical issue, you're likely going to need, short of a miracle, a physical issue.
Right. Physical solution.
Physical solution. Now, there are spiritual things that can cause physical solutions. So I'm not saying... Anyway, we're going to unpack that.
Sure.
But if the issue is truly a physical origin, then yes, we believe that there are going to be physical solutions.
Yeah, and there's some obvious things like this, and that is, we know people who, for instance, were in a traffic accident, damaged part of their brain, and now their entire personality changed. Their emotional ability to regulate their emotions has changed. It affects things, right? So you just go from the obvious example of damage to the body, and specifically damage to parts of the brain, and you realize, okay, there's a direct connection between what's going on in my body and my emotions at some level. So now we're just kind of unpacking some of the more nuances of it besides those big obvious ones.
Right. And so I would just finalize the thought of looking at our holistic model and thinking that we have a toolkit and not every issue is a nail, and so we don't always reach for the hammer. Sometimes you're going to need the hammer and the screwdriver, or you're going to need multiple things.
Well, and what you mean by complex is when you need more than one tool.
Right.
Right. So that's what we're talking about. You've got more than one origin to the problem. You need more than one tool for the solution, and that makes it a more complex thing.
Or, for instance, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit more later in the episode, but sometimes you have a physical issue, but you're going to have a spiritual warfare issue layered on top of it that maybe they're muddled, but they're not the same root,
sure.
Or things like that. So
that makes it complex. We've got multiple engines that are affecting things simultaneously.
Right. So I wanted to kind of go maybe to the deep end on that first, just because I feel like that oftentimes people approach me with that first, like that's the felt need, and so I wanted to address that head on. But let's pull back, and you often talk about the two-way street of emotions in your body.
Yeah.
So would you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so the two-way street basically is the idea that if something is wrong in my body, it affects my emotions, but also if something's wrong with my emotions, it affects my body. So all emotions manifest physically. Right, that's something to remember. I'll say it again. All emotions, right, manifest physically. So if I have fear and anger, those are high energy emotions. So what makes them high energy? High energy things are happening in my body. Mm-hmm. And that's why calming is how do I quiet my body from this emotion that has hijacked my body. And then there are low energy emotions that suck the energy out of your body, right? Shame, sadness, disgust, despair. Mm-hmm. And so you look at these things and you're like, all right, so this is why we say that emotions can affect my body. And if you get complex emotions, right, I've got anger and hopeless despair. I've got fear and sadness. I've got all complex things going on. It's a little bit like stepping on the brakes and stepping on the gas at the same time, and physically it affects my body. You do that for a long time, and you can see why people with unresolved emotional damage will have a lot of physical problems generally. And I had one doctor tell me that they estimated that 80% of their client needs were actually rooted in some sort of psychological trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and wasn't the word like psychosomatic, but that's not just believing that you have. I don't know. We're not actually medical professionals here, so I won't.
Yeah, and no, it wasn't just psychosomatic. It wasn't, is it being caused by something they're believing? It was, is there a psychological root to it?
I was just reading in your book, and you mentioned it, and you said that you used to believe that psychosomatic meant
yes.
that, but that it was the correction of.
I see.
Anyway, I don't know. I shouldn't dig into that.
I should read my book sometime.
I also just wanted to briefly address, you were talking about emotions manifesting in the body, and these days, that word, I feel like for some people could be a trigger word for, people talk about manifesting things in a more new age or occult way. And
did not know that. Okay.
And I don't know, maybe it's, I have seen it
You're
around,
more in touch than I am. What can I say? Go ahead. Yeah.
And so I just wanted to address that that's not what you meant.
No.
So, all right. Anything more on the two-way street?
Only that's a very freeing, I think, for some people to realize, like, okay, there's part of my health issues are related to the emotions. And also, because of that, a lot of times the help that you get with your emotions can make a difference in your physical symptoms. And then the other way around is that because my body being off affects my emotions, that's why prescriptions are so often part of the solution that people are given, because the doctors look at what's happening and they're like, well, physically this is not where it ought to be, so let's do some things to adjust that, and it can help, right? It can help. So I tell people that medication occasionally, right, is the whole solution, because that is what's wrong. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean it's always the solution, and it doesn't mean that it is always the right path, but I'm not in a position to prescribe when it is and when it isn't.
Well, and I would just add to that when you're dealing with, we set up in a couple episodes ago the 3 levels of breakthrough, and there being like pain relief, taking care of your symptoms and then getting to root issues and then doing repair and building up. And so sometimes you're needing the physical thing purely, maybe that's not the whole issue, but you still need the physical thing as the pain relief so that you can adjust to the rest of it. So I don't know. We're getting into really specific stuff, but point being, pain. But medicine matters, and please take it if you need it.
Yes.
All right. Well, do you have any examples?
Sure. So, first, in my own life, right, I had a huge battle with anxiety for a period of time, and taking some medication helped because getting it out of your body helps you to calm down some other things and helps you kind of recalibrate. So there have been times when I've taken medication like for when I was just not able to get anxiety out of my body. I also know, I read a book by the head of the AACC, American Association of Christian Counselors, in which he talks about a Bible teacher who was in a group that didn't believe in taking medication. And this guy got so bad that he could hardly function and ended up in a padded cell, like in a psychiatric ward. Finally, this man was able to convince the Bible teacher to try some medication. And within a couple of weeks, he was out of the pad. I can't remember the exact scenario, but you get the idea. So within a certain amount of time, he not only had recovered there, but he was back to teaching Bible and feeling like himself. And in his case, really, it was mostly medical. And that's why I say sometimes that's exactly what's needed.
And we're focusing on medicine right now, but sometimes it's diet change. Sometimes it's working on your sleep. Sometimes it is exercise. Sometimes, and so all of these things can affect our, all of these things can fixing those will help our emotional needs or what have you. I was also, jumping back into the deep end because I think it's a really clear example. But could you talk a little bit about your experience and testimonies you've heard of schizophrenia?
Sure, schizophrenia. So I would say that first time I ran into somebody who was truly schizophrenic, the only tools I had was spiritual warfare. And this person couldn't carry on a coherent conversation long enough to deal with legal ground and things like that. And so my other tool was emotional healing and memories. And again, this person couldn't carry on a coherent conversation long enough to process those past memories. And I was like stuck. I had no idea what to do with this person. Did not know they were schizophrenic. But that was my first experience with it and going, okay, I kind of see what people are talking about now, right? Because sometimes schizophrenia gets misdiagnosed because anybody these days who say, I have voices in my head is open to that diagnosis. So people who are doing listening prayer and saying, God told me something, sound an awful lot like people who are in psych wards saying, the Mother Mary told me, to kill my husband. There's, I'm saying, like there are a lot of, or God is telling me that it's okay to hate people or whatever. There's a lot of, anybody who spent much time in psych wards knows there's a lot of religious talk in people's heads. And so where I'm going with that is that there's schizophrenia is an actual malfunction physically in the body that is causing things not to connect the way that they were, supposed to be connecting. And so the normal tools aren't going to fix that. So I can't cast out a demon and get rid of the schizophrenia unless it was just misdiagnosed. I guess that's where I was going with it, is that when it's misdiagnosed, I've also had people who are diagnosed schizophrenic who, when they got rid of the demonic presence, all the issues resolved and that was cleared, but that was because they were misdiagnosed. So I've also talked to at least one psychiatrist who worked heavily with schizophrenia, who told me that it was not uncommon for them to have two sets of voices, kind of like the everyday set of voices. And he said those tend to just not make sense. They tend to be all over the place and hard to follow. And then there's a darker religious set of voices. And he tends to suspect that those are the more demonic voices so that you can have layering with that. And again, I haven't worked with it much personally because It feels like there is medical stuff that has to happen with schizophrenia that unless that happens, the rest of what I'm trying to do isn't going to help if that's what's actually going on.
Yeah. I think the crux of where we're going with this particular episode is to address the fact that physical things are real and should not be discounted.
Yes.
And that you should, listen to your doctors and do things that, or do things that you know would help you physically. Like, I'm going to start taking more walks throughout the day or whatever, from the little scale to the large scale of issues that we want to make sure people take Engine 1 seriously, because we talk a lot about spiritual stuff, and the fact is we are spiritual beings embodied in bodies. God created us with bodies, and he designed us. We talk a lot about the brain and brain science and how things work, because we are incarnational creatures. We are. Anyway, do you want to talk any more about that on the biblical side of things?
Well, the body and what the Bible has to say about the body. It is interesting because a lot of the emotion words in the Bible are related to body functions and body parts. So we talk about having weak knees or limp arms, or we talk about the countenance and the face. And it just reinforces this idea that our emotions are always affect the body, and can be seen and shown in some way through what the body is doing. So because it's a two-way street, there are times when addressing the root issues that resolve those things help your body, and there are times when you've got to deal with your body in order to resolve the emotional issue that you're going through. So it's not that, we have all the answers on this. We're just trying to let people know, take it seriously, and we are not anti-medication just because we are pro-spiritual warfare. Right.
All right. Next episode, we're going to talk more about the body, and we've got an acrostic for you and all the things. But for now, I want to let our listeners who might be using this podcast as a book club of sorts know that you can go deeper in today's topic in Chapter 6 of the book Breakthrough. And if you are just getting started and waiting on your book, or maybe you're wanting to share this book with a friend, we've got a free first chapter for you in the description. So hope you'll check that out, and also hope that you will check out this November conference. I think that we will be covering a lot of good ground here. So, Father, any final thoughts for this episode?
I think when I started in ministry, I tended to think that beliefs was it. Like that all emotions were anchored in beliefs, and you just got to get your beliefs straightened out and everything else took care of itself. So for me, it was a big aha moment to realize that it's not just about beliefs, and it's not just about thinking more biblically. Because sometimes we hear the truth will set you free, and we think it's the only thing that sets you free. And it's not the only thing that sets you free. I will say, if I have problems in my body, though, it will make it much easier to believe wrong things. Mm-hmm. And so I do think that beliefs tend to get involved at some level in almost all of our emotions. And so I would just put it there, that if you've got a physical problem and you are having trouble beating it, it's going to tend to affect the other engines too. It's going to tend to make it more difficult to bond in joy, and more difficult to believe positive, correct things. And that's why it's important to pay attention.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you. Yeah. What are you saying?
Well, and before we go too much further, I just remembered, I met a young lady at church the other day who said, could I please say hi to her on our podcast? And when you get an 11-year-old listening to the podcast, I'm like, I got to honor that. So Stella, hello. I'm glad that you will listen and watch, and Good to have you part. Good to have you part of the team.
Yes. Oh, thank you for remembering that.
Thanks for joining us on the trail today. Did you like this episode? Would you like more people to see it? This is the part where I ask you to like, comment, subscribe, share with a friend. And do you love this channel? One of the best ways that you can support us is by becoming a Deeper Walk trailblazer. Thanks again. We'll see you back on the trail next week.